Public Service Commission to order. Secretary Burgess, are there any changes to the final agenda?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. There are no changes to this morning's agenda.
So, preview of coming attractions here. I want you to notice how many people are in black today, except for me, because we're mourning the loss of someone who's going to be leaving the commission so shortly. So so we'll talk about that later, but I noticed that all of us feel rather somber. All but one. Not you. We would not be. Not that we don't love you, Paul.
Not today.
So we're going to proceed with the regular agenda. The first item for discussion and information only is item 201, which is the report on the New York gas, electric, and supply readiness for 2016-2017 winter. Cindy McCarron is Deputy Director of Gas and Water. Lekka Jonai is Chief Bulk Electric Systems. Paul D'Armico, who is Electric Rates and Tariffs, and Lorna Gillings, Utility Customer Assistance Specialist, are going to be presenting this. And I think Rajat Apali is going to do a step in, maybe, right? Just, for fun as well. So, Cindy, please proceed.
Sure. Good morning, Chair Zibelman and Commissioners. It's my pleasure today to brief you on staff's annual winter supply review and the readiness of the state's gas local distribution companies, which I will refer to as LDCs. Based upon our review and representations from the LDCs regarding natural gas supply readiness for the upcoming winter season, we have concluded these things. The LDCs serving New York State have adequate natural gas supply, delivery capacity, and storage inventory to satisfy firm customer demand under design winter conditions. New York State continues to see relatively low natural gas commodity prices. While hedging strategies and assets vary by company, on average, about 47% of winter supply is hedged. A return of normal weather this winter, compared to last winter's very mild weather, would cause customers to use more natural gas than last winter, therefore could result in bill increases. However, compared to the average bills over the past 5 years, bills are expected to be lower than the 5-year average. The LDCs are taking steps to ensure that interruptible customers have alternate fuel on hand and that the interruptible customers stand ready to stop using natural gas when asked to by the LDCs. Staff continues communications with oil industry representatives and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, also known as NYSERDA, to ensure that customers have access to adequate supplies of winter heating fuel. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates the point I made earlier about last winter's mild weather. This graph shows weather variations for Albany and New York City for every winter since the winter of 2001-2002. And that's calculated using the heating degree days. So just to remind everybody, a heating degree day is the difference between the average temperature for a day and 65 degrees, with the assumption that at 65 you're neither heating nor cooling your house. If the bars on this graph are on the positive side, there was more heating load for that winter. So you can see the bar for last winter went very negative, so graphically showing you that it was very mild. Next slide, please. Our review indicates that the LDCs serving New York have adequate supplies to meet expected customer requirements for design weather conditions this winter. Design weather is defined as the coldest weather the LDC could see during a winter and varies by region of the state. In New York City, the LDCs plan for an average temperature of 0 degrees Fahrenheit, but for upstate, they plan for around 15 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Staff will continue to monitor supply, prices, and interruptible customer compliance throughout the winter and report to you any situations that require commission attention. Next slide, please. Natural gas prices, as demonstrated through the index known as NYMEX futures prices, have trended downward over the last several years due to the development of northeastern gas supply reserves, which are closer to our area. As an example, if you look at the graph, in January 2009, the futures price for gas delivered that month was around $6 per decatherm, compared to, for January 2016, it was closer to $2 per decatherm. And just for reference, a decatherm, a typical home uses about 70 decatherms for the winter heating season. Last winter's warm weather had the effect of reducing supply prices. It also caused less natural gas to be withdrawn from storage, which resulted in high end-of-season storage inventories. This created a situation where storage injections this summer were necessarily low. The reduced demand from firm customers last winter also caused more natural gas to be available for interruptible customers and electric generators that rely on interruptible natural gas capacity. Next slide, please. The LDCs purchase gas to supply their customers' winter needs in three ways. The first way is by filling their natural gas storage facilities during the summer when demand is low. The second way is by hedging, which acts like an insurance policy to guarantee the purchase price of the gas will not go too high. The third way is by purchasing at the prevailing market price during the winter, which fluctuates with market forces such as demand and weather and is called flowing gas. As this slide illustrates, the cost of gas in physical storage and the cost of gas that is hedged for this winter has declined from last winter. In fact, due to the high storage gas inventories at the end of last winter, beginning of spring, the cost of natural gas in storage is the lowest seen in about 20 years. This year's futures prices for flowing gas are higher right now forecasted than last year at this time. But as you can see, due to the warm weather last winter, the price of flowing gas dropped through the winter and ended up being quite a bit lower than forecast. The price of flowing gas is very weather dependent, but given our proximity to the northeastern natural gas production areas, we have access to plentiful supplies, and even with colder than normal weather, prices to firm natural gas customers should be fairly stable. Next slide, please. We expect the average residential customer's winter heating bill to be just less than $700 for the coming winter, assuming normal weather, but this varies by utility. If another warm winter occurs, we will expect customer bills to be the same or maybe even lower than last winter. Next slide, please. This slide shows how natural gas supply prices have changed over the last few years and how they can be influenced by weather. The polar vortex winter of 2013-14, which is the two highest bars there, saw the highest natural gas prices in recent memory. This slide also demonstrates a general downward trend in natural gas supply prices in the last 5 years. So, next slide, please. We annually coordinate with NYSERDA and oil industry representatives on winter preparedness, which has proven to be effective in improving communications between the oil and gas heating markets. Most interruptible customers that have ultra-low sulfur number 2 oil as their backup fuel must have adequate oil storage capacity and sufficient fuel on hand. Customers lacking sufficient storage space are required to enter the heating season with their tanks full and a contract for replenishment of oil as it is drawn down. LDCs must remind their interruptible customers to replenish oil inventories whenever accumulated gas service interruptions equal a total of 5 days prior to February 15th of each winter. LDCs will be conducting tests and may inspect the alternate fuel burning equipment of interruptible customers to ensure compliance with requirements. Staff will convene a conference call with oil industry representatives and NYSERDA when there are interruptions lasting 3 consecutive days or a forecast of 3 days of weather of 20 degrees or lower. In addition, LDCs are encouraged to be as flexible as possible in meeting the needs of any individual customers that may have difficulty obtaining supplies of their alternate fuel. Finally, staff will be coming back to the Commission in the near future with recommendations on protocols for interruptible customers that will help to increase the reliability of the natural gas system. Next slide, please. So in summary, our review indicates that the LDCs serving New York have secured adequate supplies of natural gas to meet expected customer requirements this winter. Staff will, of course, continue to monitor supply prices and interruptible customer compliance through the winter and report back to you any situations that require your attention. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll be happy to take questions now or at the end and whatever you would like.
Just knowing the amount of information we're about ready to cover, let me just pause for a minute before we move on and see if any of the commissioners have questions for Cindy on the gas supply situation.
I'll wait till the end.
Well, I want to go through each one. So if you have questions on the gas supply, I'd rather just deal with it now, and then we'll move on to the other issues.
So I know the winter reliability program is geared towards looking at what we have from resources perspective and making sure that we are in good standing as we head into the winter. And so a lot of the mitigation factors or measures that we do are to address pressures that may be on the system. And so when we look at that, we really need to look at the outlook from the ISO, EIA, Natural Gas Supply Association, as well as regionally and what other states and what other state ISOs are looking at. And to the extent that you mentioned that we have an adequate natural gas supply to satisfy firm customer demand. Last year, I believe, was the second largest, warmest weather for the winter heating season on record. So to the extent that we're looking at some of the pressures and the need, not just for this winter, but for future in terms of reliability, are we working regionally with folks on that issue and some of the pressures that may be there for capacity constraint, supply constraint?
Cindy, do
Clearly, the interruptible customers, one of the interruptible major customers is generators. And to the extent there are issues or concerns surrounding adequacy of fuel for them, that's going to be picked up in Lekka's presentation on how the ISOs, New York and regional entities, New England ISO and PJM are dealing with it. To the extent it's about other interruptible customers, non-generators, I think we have a pretty good, and the LDCs have a good handle on the needs and the coordination with the oil industry and what needs to be done.
Okay, I'll save my comments for Lekka's presentation then. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, Cindy? I mean, it's good to see, frankly, that the prices going into this winter are forecasted to be lower. We're going to be covering, I know, the hedging strategies in a little bit, but I think one of the things that is important, and I'm glad to see we're continuing to do this, is work with the LDCs and the oil interruptible customers. I know that that's one of the challenges that we've confronted several times in terms of where the oil customers weren't able to get inventories, and I appreciate the work that staff is doing with NYSERDA to get ahead of that. And so to be clear, if we're forecasting colder temperatures or 3 consecutive days, we will have calls, and I think that's worked well in the past. I've heard from the oil industry that's helped them as well as helping to manage interruptibles, so I appreciate that. I think with that, then, why don't we move on to Lekka. Lekka, welcome.
Good morning, Chair Zilberman and Commissioners. My name is Leka Jonai, and I'm Chief of the Department's Bulk Electric System Section. I'm here today to brief you on staff's review of the bulk electric system's preparedness for the upcoming 2016-2017 winter period. Just a brief reminder that the bulk electric system comprises the state's major generating facilities, the high voltage substations, and the high voltage transmission lines that tie all those together. And before diving into the presentation, I'd like to say at the outset that based upon this review, we conclude that the bulk electric system is prepared to meet the state's upcoming winter electric demands. So next slide. Okay. This chart shows the summer and winter historic coincident peak demand since the year 2000, with the color red representing summer and the color blue winter. It also illustrates what we already know, that is, the state as a whole is a summer peaking state and therefore has to have sufficient available resources to meet loads well above those typically experienced during the winter. For example, this past summer's actual peak demand was 32,076 megawatts, while the forecast for this winter is 24,445 megawatts, or about 7,600 megawatts lower than you'd expect during the summer period. Just to round out the statistics here, last winter's actual peak demand was 23,317 megawatts, and that occurred on January 19th, 2016. For comparison, this was about 2,400 megawatts lower than the 2013-14 or polar vortex winter record of 25,738 megawatts. Next slide. This slide summarizes the resources expected to be available to meet customer demands this winter. Starting with installed resources of 40,092 megawatts, and accounting for the various line items, such special case resources, or SCRs as denoted here, external purchase contracts, projected capacity outages, which are based on history and planned maintenance, the peak load forecast, and the daily operating reserve requirement, there remains a significant capacity margin of 9,433 megawatts for the upcoming winter. Next slide. Major generation facilities. As part of its assessment efforts, staff reached out to generation owners located primarily in southeast New York, whose assets include about 12,000 megawatts of dual fuel generation capability. Dual fuel meaning, excuse me, the generating unit can burn either natural gas or fuel oil or some blend of the two. Particular attention is paid to this part of the state because of the concentration of electric demand in both New York City and Long Island, and the limited electric transmission capability into this area compared to the rest of the state, making it necessary that local generation be available to reliably meet customer demands. In addition, the overall high demands placed on the natural gas system during the winter may require these electric generators to switch to fuel oil when natural gas is unavailable in the quantities needed for electric production. So what did we find? What we found this year is that these generation owners are continuing to implement lessons learned from the polar vortex winter of 2013-2014, including increased pre-winter on-site fuel oil reserves, firm contracts with fuel oil suppliers to maintain minimum inventory levels, more proactive / aggressive replenishment plans, and more proactive pre-winter maintenance and facilities preparation. Also, we have developed a winter communications protocol with DEC, NYSERDA, and DOT and NISO to address any fuel issues that may arise expeditiously. Next slide, please. The NISO, prior to last winter, had instituted various changes to its market systems to incent generators to be available, and had also increased the total daily operating reserves it procures to 2,620 megawatts from 1,965 megawatts. I'll just give you one brief example, because NISO's market systems are fairly complicated, as we all know that, but one of the items, a generator gets a day-ahead schedule, right? So he's committed to certain output levels for each individual hour. What can happen is the next day something may happen and NISO may need that generator to go up to increase its output. So if it's a cold day and fuel is very pricey at that point, he may go out to procure fuel and it's maybe something much higher than what he had forecast a day ahead. So there's a mechanism where that increased fuel price is allowed to be included in his bid and then recover his cost for that sort of thing. So that was a big improvement. Also increasing the operating reserves purchases, that also increased the price of these operating reserves, which would incent generators to then bid into that market. So those are just some basics. In addition, the NISO and interstate pipelines enhance the sharing of operational information, providing better situational awareness to both the NISO and the pipeline operators. Among other activities, during the winter period, NISO very closely monitors generator fuel levels and their respective replenishments. Turning to our neighbors, our immediate neighboring ISOs, the ISO New England and PJM, are making their necessary preparations for the coming winter and have various programs in place to guard against fuel shortages and to incent generators to be available when needed. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I also want to note, in addition to the items that you noted, I think last year or 2 years ago, the ISO put a gas person actually on the operating floor. I see folks are nodding their heads, and I think that's also helped too, so that there's a lot of information going on in the winter in terms of what's happening in the gas market and what's happening in the electric market, so we can improve coordination. I think that it's good that we're continuing to pursue what we can do in light of our experience in the polar vortex, even though we have the lowest number of gas prices that we've had since, I think, 2008, I saw in slide 5, where we still had that bump. And I can't remember how much that cost us. It was like $1 billion, $2 billion.
Yeah, during the polar vortex, if you just looked at the spot electric energy prices, LMPs, in the market, the previous winter compared to the polar vortex winter, I think we estimated the increased cost over the 3 or 4 months about $2 billion, New York State. But the actual consumer impact perhaps would be somewhat less given the existing hedges that the utilities and others had.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the advantages, of course, is we have fuel diversity in New York, and gas only represents as a supply pool about 40% of our overall mix right now, which I think helped mitigate that. But clearly, and that is a good thing. But clearly, taking a look at these strategies, I know FERC is also looking at what to do about coordination, and particularly New England and in PJM. I think there's less of an issue in New York, as I can understand, but particularly I think in New England there's a concern, and I believe there's an ongoing proceeding, couple of ongoing proceedings at FERC that's looking at adequacy going forward. Is that correct?
Yes, clearly winter polar vortex sort of woke up everybody, and there's an increased awareness of the need to better coordinate electric and gas markets. So that's one aspect, coordination of nominations and balancing. The other is to ensure that the generators have adequate incentives to have the fuel that is needed to commit and dispatch.
So anyway, well, it's good news for the winter, at least for us. And if there are any other further comments, questions for Leka? Diane?
You mentioned that interruptible customers may need to switch to fuel oil, and Cindy touched upon this as well with the interruptible customers. And I know that every year before the winter starts, we look to make sure that those customers who will possibly need to switch to dual fuel are able to do that, and if not, giving them time, a short window to fix whatever they need to remain as an interruptible customer. Can you just talk a little bit about when that will start and where we think we will be on that aspect.
You're talking on the bulk power supply or on the
Both of them talking in general, on this issue and what we're doing for the interruptible customers and the switch to fuel oil. Because my concern, obviously, is looking and making sure that everyone is able to do so, but also in terms of then, do we have adequate supply, and to the extent that we also need to look at what that means for our emissions. It's something that sort of weighs on me, because while we are looking at our winter reliability program and making sure we have the proper mitigation measures, it is something that concerns me in terms of some unintended consequences, and the concern of folks having to bulk up, for lack of a better word, but also what that then means, in terms of or going out there future-wise from reliability perspective, but also from making decisions contract-wise, and extra supply that they may need to purchase that they wouldn't have had beforehand.
So Raj, why don't you, and
Let me
Cindy, why don't you
start
start
and
with the
then-
LDCs, and then maybe we'll move to the bulk power, retail, then wholesale.
Okay, I was going to start with the wholesale.
Oh, well, you
and-
go in direction. It's your day today, Raj. Go whatever direction you want to go.
I think there are multiple steps to address your concern or comment. First, the ISO has auditing procedures. Mostly the dual fuel generation is downstate where the concern is. So they have procedures for auditing to ensure that the generators have adequate dual fuel capabilities. Second is, like I mentioned, they're also implementing additional incentive mechanisms to make sure the generators have the incentive to be there. And third, I think, has been having conversations, and I can ask him to elaborate with the downstate generators to just talk through this issue over the last 2-3 years since the polar vortex as to what they're doing. And also, given that the neighbors are also doing the same thing, ISO New England, hopefully they won't have to lean on us as much in the winter, which would also help us. So, you want to elaborate on your
Sure,
conversation?
I can. Particularly downstate, I mean, these dual fuel generators are very well versed in fuel switching. This is not a new thing to them. They do it. They have to do it at times in the summer also. There's also rules in the summer for having to switch to oil. And winter, I mean, this is a routine for them. And based on my conversations with them, all their equipment's checked, or they do all their normal maintenance and stuff to maintain that. But it's not a big thing, so to speak, for those guys, for those generation asset owners.
And then just, on the gas side for the interruptible customers, right? So the utilities have already begun the reminders, the letters that get sent out saying, look, you need to go and fill your tank, check your tank. They will be scheduling their tests very soon, so that they will do a planned interruption, right, of a limited duration. And then that identifies usually some people that aren't ready. And that's kind of their wake-up call. Look, winter's really coming. You need to get on board here. And then the other thing is the people that we had that maybe last winter didn't interrupt when they were supposed to, the utilities will go and physically inspect their facilities and even, sometimes check the level of fuel in the tank, and make sure the equipment is hooked up and running appropriately. So, yeah, they are beginning those steps.
And in both cases, on the bulk power electric side and the gas side, we have initiated and have pretty good communication protocols that we are following now among the relevant players, stakeholders. On the electric side, is like I said, we have been working with the DEC, DOT, and the ISO to make sure, should there be a need to take any actions quickly, that we are prepared to do that we are not trying to invent something at that point in time. Similarly, on the natural gas side, we've been working with the oil dealers, NYSERDA, and the LDCs, and I think there's a common understanding of how these protocols work, and so those would be implemented again this winter.
Great. As I say it, there are always, pressure points, weather, economy, consumer demand, price vitality, and looking at the proper storage and production. So I am glad, and I know that one of the things that we learned from polar vortex also is the need for operational flexibility and responsiveness, balancing that with our need for energy reliability as we are in the winter. So, I think the most important aspect of this is the continued collaboration, not just with ISO and the state agencies, but obviously, as we already talked about, FERC and EPSA and Natural Gas Supply Association, as well as the gas and electric marketers and the utilities and a whole list of others, including, most importantly, the consumers, and working through those issues and looking again and taking a step back after each season to see what we need to do, not just to get through the particular season, but for the long-term reliability, in keeping in mind some of the pressures that are on there and our projections out as we go forward, making sure that we have safe and reliable fuel at a price point that works for folks.
I agree.
I think it's probably true that Leka Jonah is on the speed dial of all the downstate generators should they need something.
That's correct.
And they're on his, more importantly. But I think we all agree with that, and it's not just a short-term view. We have to take a longer-term view because these things take time to put in place. Any further questions for Commissioner Acampora?
Not a question. I've listened to quite a few of these reports over the years, and I really commend our staff for the work that they do in staying on top of everything. And I think it was important when the chair mentioned about our diversity. And I don't think I can stress that enough. And Raj, you mentioned how we have come to the assistance of ISO New England. So what we really did with the Clean Energy Standard, I think is something that other states really should be looking at, because we're very fortunate that this has been part of what we do in making sure we have diversity in our state, so that when we have these issues, we can work it out, and it always has. So thank you all for the report.
To your comment, amen.
Matt, what is the fuel mix in New England now? Do we know?
They're heavily gas dependent, and they're retiring a bunch of units, so it's getting worse. So
It's
to
like
speak.
60 to 70% natural
I'd
gas
have to
at
get
this
you a
point.
number on that, but
Yeah.
it's
It's not good. Okay, Paul, welcome.
thank you.
Good morning, Chair Tillman. Good morning, Commissioners. In this part of the presentation, I'll be providing you with a summary of how the electric utilities have performed at reducing the electric supply price volatility for their full-service residential customers.
Either you're going to have to
To
move it slower.
Better?
Yeah, and we have old ears.
I'll
up
try
there.
to speak up too. So as I said, I'll be going over the supply price volatility mitigation efforts that the utilities have done over the past few years. Compare this winter's forecast electric market prices to last winter's actuals and forecasts, and finally provide you with an estimate of how we expect the full-service residential customer supply costs to compare to the last few years. This graph shows the results of the electric utilities' electric supply price volatility mitigation efforts since June of 2008. It compares the average New York ISO day-ahead market price volatility, the red line, with the volatility of the utilities' residential electric supply portfolios, the blue line. Each point represents the price volatility over a 12-month period as measured by the coefficient of variation. The 2014 polar vortex resulted in increased market prices and increased price volatility. Even though customers benefited from the hedges that the utilities had in place, the bill impacts that the customers experienced or high, and as a result of lessons learned, the utilities modified certain aspects of their hedging programs. The changes included increasing the fixed price hedge level for their residential supply customers during the winter months from about 55% to 70% on a statewide average basis, as well as certain utilities maintaining multiple portfolios to better hedge for their customers located in different regions in their service territories. This chart shows how the New York ISO day-ahead around-the-clock market prices have varied over the last few years. The solid lines represent the actual average monthly market prices for 3 New York ISO zones, West, Hudson, and New York City. The dashed lines of similar color shows the NYMEX futures prices just prior to the winter seasons. In the winter months, electric market prices can be significantly affected by gas market prices. These gas prices are then reflected in New York ISO electric market prices. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, last winter was significantly warmer than normal, whereas the prior 2 winters were significantly colder than normal. Last winter's warmer than normal weather allowed the gas market prices to stay relatively low, and therefore the electric market prices remained low, especially as we've seen in the last few years. This variability is why the utilities hedge for their full-service residential and small commercial customers, to protect them against these wide market price swings. This chart shows this winter's expected average energy market prices based on NYMEX futures and how they compare to last winter's forecasts and actual market prices for New York City, Hudson Valley, and West. Last winter's expected energy market prices that were reported to you last October are in green. Last winter's actual market prices are in blue, and this winter's expected market prices are in red. As shown, last winter's actual market prices were significantly lower than was forecast going into the winter, about 60% less, which again reflects last winter's unusually warm weather. And although this year's market prices are expected to be higher than last year's actuals, on a forecast basis, they're about 7 to 20% lower than the prior year's futures. The actual price this winter will vary, of course, based on weather and other conditions. If we experience a warmer winter than normal, we would expect that the actual market prices will be lower than the futures. With respect to customer supply prices this winter season, we expect that on a statewide average basis that full-service residential customers will spend less than they have over the last 5 years on average. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The prices that you're showing on this last slide, those are electric?
Yes, those are what the retail.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the left.
So those are what the full-service residential customers, on average, on a statewide basis, paid over the last few winters, last 5 winters, and what's expected to occur this winter.
I saw a couple of weeks ago the EIA reported statistics, where on the industrial level, I think this is a great news story for the state, actually on the industrial level, where we were 50% above average 10 years ago, we're now 8% below average on retail rates for industrial customers. And I think that again, the hedging strategies that we deploy and as well as maintaining the diversity mix is showing in the sense that we're less subject to the volatility of gas prices and can weather it better, which is a good news story, I believe, for the state. So I have no comments. I think, again, this looks like we're in good shape. Any questions or comments for Paul? Good. Good. Okay, Lorna, welcome.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. This report describes the work that department staff and the New York State Energy Utilities are doing to provide customers with information to help manage their energy usage and bills for the 2016-2017 winter season. As in previous years, both the department and the utilities will promote messages regarding the expected pricing and the utilities' actions to reduce price volatility. Messages will focus on how customers can manage winter bills through bill payment options such as budget billing and deferred payment agreements, financial assistance programs such as the Home Energy Assistance Program. Customers are encouraged to take simple, affordable measures to reduce energy use, help lower energy bills, and become more energy efficient. We will also raise awareness of the resources available to assist consumers faced with heat-related energy emergencies. Finally, in addition to educating customers about controlling their heating costs, winter messaging will include safety information regarding natural gas, electricity, and carbon monoxide. The department's winter outreach program uses a variety of methods to get our message to consumers, such as developing and distributing publications to over 5,000 elected officials and community leaders regarding winter preparedness. To further increase our reach, staff engages in grassroots outreach, including presentations to community groups and exhibits at public events across the state in order to reach as many New Yorkers as possible. We also use the department's website and our call center staff to get our messages out to utility customers. In addition to the department's outreach program, the utilities have developed plans to alert customers about the following: mitigating price volatility, billing options, storm preparation measures, and gas and electric safety. Also, energy efficiency tips and information on heating assistance programs. The companies are using a variety of tools to reach customers, including news releases and paid media ads, bill inserts and bill envelope messages, newsletters, on-hold telephone messages, website features, and social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The utilities also work with municipal and elected officials and partner with human service organizations and community groups. Finally, the companies provide training to their consumer advocates and call center staff on winter messaging and customer assistance. In conclusion, the Office of Consumer Services Winter Energy Outreach and Education Program is designed to ensure that New York utility customers have access to information and programs they need to manage their winter energy bills and use energy efficiently. Staff will continue to monitor the need for additional outreach and education efforts and will work with utilities to make modifications as needed throughout the heating season. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work that staff does in this regard. I think it's very important, and the fact is that we have to do it constantly and consistently, and it's I know important big part of our job. Any question or comments?
Let's say that I'm a heating customer and I'm low income and it's fall and things are pretty good right now, but I'm really, really concerned that I'm not going to be able to pay for my heat this winter and I'm liable to get shut off. What should a consumer in this situation, what steps should that consumer in this situation take now in the fall? Budget billing would be one?
Budget billing would be one. The first thing they would want to do is call the utility to let them know that they're having a problem paying the bill. The Home Energy Assistance Program, HEAP, will begin soon, sometime around November 15th usually. And so they could be referred to for that assistance. Also, some of the utility companies have their own in-house low-income program, payment assistance program, that they will refer the customer to.
So the first thing to do would be call the utility and see what they can do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments? Commissioner Ackenborg?
I'd just like to say that our Office of Consumer Services has always done an excellent job in dealing with the municipalities, with elected officials, with the utilities, but we do have folks out there that sometimes we don't reach, so it's always an ongoing effort. Sometimes people have very strange ideas on how they should be heating their home. which causes, unfortunately, death and destruction. So I think that, always staying on top of this is very positive. Even though we do a great job, it's still not perfect yet, because we will hear very sad stories during the winter. So I really appreciate the effort and encourage you to keep hammering it home. Thank you. And thanks for the presentation, Lorna. Is this your first time?
My second time.
Second time. I know I don't see you here often.
Our rules, however, just to be clear, do prevent shut-off during the heating days.
Yes, there are special winter protections, and the utilities voluntarily do not terminate when the temperature reaches certain degrees.
Thank you. Good. I think that does it. Thank you, folks, and let's hope for mild weather, because it's always a nice thing from a bill perspective and a life perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Mr. Kelly. Welcome. Our next item is item 202, and that's in connection with petitions related to our April 2016 Community Choice Aggregation Order. And Ted Kelly, who's Assistant Counsel, will be presenting today, and Luann Shares, Acting Director of Consumer Services, is also here to talk through the item. Also, just for the commissioners' information, because community choice aggregation is something that we are pursuing in the state, and we had the Westchester pilot, I asked staff as part of this discussion to actually give us a bit of an update on what's happened in Westchester, so we have a bit of context too, since that was one of the reasons we wanted to proceed with that pilot, was to get some real-time experience as we're developing the market. With that, I think, Ted, you're beginning?
Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
morning. Good morning, Chair Zibelman and Commissioners. Item 202 is the order on two petitions filed regarding the Commission's April 2016 order authorizing framework for community choice aggregation opt-out programs, which established a process and guidelines for municipalities in New York State to develop and implement community choice aggregation, or CCA, programs. The two petitions are National Fuel Gases petition for rehearing and reconsideration, and the Joint Utilities petition for reconsideration and clarification. Luann's going to start off by providing an update on Sustainable Westchester's CCA pilot program, which was authorized in February 2015 by the Commission.
Welcome, Luann.
Good morning. Sustainable Westchester began enrolling customers in June 2016. The initial opt-out rates were about 5% for Con Ed and 13% for NYSEG. Since then, additional customers have opted out. Currently, about 83% of the eligible customers in Con Ed service territory are enrolled in this Sustainable Westchester pilot, and about 64% of the eligible customers in NYSEG's territory are enrolled. The NYSEG numbers reflect NYSEG time of use customers that were returned to the utility, because when the agreement between Sustainable Westchester and the ESCO was negotiated, they didn't have a specific rate for time of use customers. So that's a lesson learned during the pilot. Although Sustainable Westchester does not guarantee a savings, at our request, Con Ed evaluated about 1,500 customers and determined that customers have saved money, on average about $10 a month for the first 3 months of the pilot program. Of course, 3 months is not really enough time to determine the success of the pilot, but we will continue to evaluate it. Finally, the department has received 14 complaints regarding the Sustainable Westchester pilot, although approximately 91,000 customers are participating. We are closely monitoring this project and speak with Sustainable Westchester, the ESCOs, and the utilities regularly on issues they're identifying. And for your information, Sustainable Westchester is required to file a report. The first report is due, they're required to file annual reports. The first report is due 13 months after they began enrolling customers, which is about mid-2017. So we'll be providing more information then.
Luann, just on the complaints, without discussing the specifics, I mean, what were the nature of the complaints or concerns that we heard?
I think most of them were complaints where the customers couldn't understand why there was a new entity showing up on their Con Ed or NYSEG bill. And I think, one of the lessons is the municipalities are going to have to do more to educate customers so that they really understand. I think the opt-out letters that were used could be improved, so that's something else we're working on. There's utility switch letters that could be improved, something else we're working on.
Good. I mean, from my take, before we go on to the proceeding, I mean, I think the fact that the opt-out rates were relatively low, I think, is a good signal, because one of the things that we're hoping to happen with CCA is that customers would have an interest in moving, and having the local unit of government involved would allow for that. Plus, with a competitive process in terms of securing the CCA provider, we could get a better deal for residential customers. So, recognizing this is all early days, it's still nice to know that that we're headed in the right direction, and we're finding obviously always opportunities to improve, but at least the early returns are more positive, and I think very positive, as opposed to negative in that respect.
One other point that Sustainable Westchester feels very strongly about is customers who are directed to Sustainable Westchester rather than to the utility or to the DPS. They have a much better success rate of the customer not dropping out of the program, because they're able to spend the time with the customer explaining the program. So that's something I think we need to consider as we move forward on these.
Good, thank you. Any questions about Luann on this now? Commissioner Berman?
On Sustainable Westchester, which I think is Westchester Power now, if I'm not mistaken, how does it get looked at from complaints coming in? Is there a requirement for the municipalities to keep complaints? It seems like there's a lot of different folks and avenues to direct complaints. So do we have a system in place so that we're actually capturing any complaints or positive comments that come in?
Does the department have a process? We review all the complaints and we'll direct them either to the ESCO or Sustainable Westchester. As far as Sustainable Westchester, the complaints they're receiving, we would expect that they would be discussed in the report that they'll file.
Yes, with respect to complaints that are initially received by the ESCO or Sustainable Westchester, and somebody, instead of coming directly to the commission or the utility, the April order, which does apply to Sustainable Westchester, requires that if they can't resolve the complaint, they direct the customer to the utility or to the department as appropriate, and also requires that in the annual reports that are filed, they keep track of any complaints, including ones that they resolve and ones that they direct forward.
Okay. So the April order, which was after the February order, which adopted the Sustainable Westchester / Westchester Power pilot, the April order itself had some things that were different from the pilot. And if I remember correctly, we had a discussion at session in April on some of those drill downs that might be in the order wouldn't necessarily apply to Sustainable Westchester unless they came back and actually directly asked for that. So how has that worked?
It's like Ted or Luann?
So that some of the initial reporting or initial compliance requirements, the implementation plan and the data security plan, which are required of new CCAs post-April order. Sustainable Westchester was not required to go back and file those because their initial petition and then a data security agreement they'd negotiated with the utilities essentially fulfilled the same requirement and rendered refiling unnecessary. But with regard to the annual reports, Sustainable Westchester is held to all of the requirements for annual reports that appear in the April order,
Okay.
which supplement requirements that were in their original order because they were always required to file some annual report.
Okay, and I'll save my other comments after the full presentation. Thank
Any other questions about sustainable, or was it Westchester Power?
The overarching organization is still called Sustainable Westchester, but they've kind of started to call their CCA segment Westchester Power because they also do some other things.
Okay. Thank you. Anything? Okay, then we'll move on then. Ted, do you want to, we'll present the next item, which is the petition for rehearing.
Yes. So NFG's petition for rehearing requests that the Commission on rehearing modify the program from an opt-out program for residents to an opt-in program. This item would reject NFG's request because, as described in the initial order and further described in this item, both New York's our experience with New York retail markets and evidence from other states that have CCA programs demonstrate that opt-out treatment is necessary for CCA programs to be successful. One example is that New Jersey initially created their CCA program as an opt-in program for residents, and that no CCA programs were created under that framework, and it was only after they amended their program to become an opt-out program that they created some successful CCA programs, which they do have a number of now. The opt-out treatment of CCA programs is also justified given the consumer protections included, which include the requirement that the elected municipal representatives authorize the program, the consumer education and outreach requirements, the requirement that the implementation plan, including those outreach plans, be reviewed by the Commission and approved, and the opt-out letter, as well as the 2 billing cycle safe harbor period after enrollment, which prevents anyone from being charged a cancellation fee if they somehow miss the initial opt-out letter and outreach, but then see it on their bill and decide they don't want to be a member. NFG's petition does not present any new facts or arguments that would justify a change to this decision. This item also grants the joint utilities request for reconsideration and clarification. The reconsideration is 2 minor technical changes to the data transfers, which utilities are required to perform to CCA administrators or municipalities. No municipalities or potential administrators or ESCOs filed in opposition to those changes, and they're reasonable changes to improve the consumer privacy protections and flow of the programs. It also clarifies that the joint utilities request that all interested individuals and entities, including the utilities, will have the opportunity to comment on each implementation plan filed to establish a new CCA program before the Commission makes a decision regarding whether to approve it. The item also addresses a concern raised by the City of New York in comments that it could be difficult to implement a CCA program citywide all at once, given its large geographic size, large population, and overlapping jurisdictions. So this order clarifies that the city and other municipalities are permitted to implement CCA programs through a phased or partial approach, and it does require that they identify in the implementation plan that they will be doing so, the reason for doing so, and whether and how they plan to expand it to other areas of the city. That concludes my presentation, and Luann and I are available for questions.
On the just a couple comments. One on the opt-out and on the gas issue. It just seems to me that it's clear the evidence is becoming clear that the community aggregation is a very effective way to get consumers engaged in making energy choices. I had an opportunity to visit with a colleague who works in California, and apparently the community aggregation program is going gangbusters there, and people are really looking at how they can use communities not just for power supply, but for distributed energy resources, energy efficiency, and more and more counties and cities are just opting in to take a look at how to get engaged with. So I think that I didn't see anything in the record that would suggest we should reconsider our decision to include gas and have opt-out, because I think it's clear that that's the only way to really get people engaged and to be able to negotiate these contracts. So I feel comfortable with the order. On the other provision concerning the rollout strategy, now all of the communities have to do implementation plans, and it would include segments of communities of 2. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I would think that there's going to be a balance, right? We're going to, obviously, there are natural geographic sizes or community sizes we'll look at. If there are segments that are either a partial community or it looks like segments of populations are being left out that shouldn't be left out, whether there's redlining, whether it's intentional or unintentional, that gives us an opportunity in the implementation plan to address that concern, because that would be a concern of mine, where people slice it so thin and then you have half the city in and half out and people not understanding why. So staff will look at that, and if there is a concern, those plans, I think, come back to the commission,
Yes,
right?
they're subject to commission approval.
Okay, I'm comfortable with this on all of that, as well as the data, so I would intend to vote for it. Any further questions or comments? Commissioner Sayre, begin with you.
I've had experience in the telecom industry with a lot of marketing programs and plans, and I have found that even with multiple mailings and door-to-door solicitation, if you get a response rate in the 5% rate, you've died and gone to heaven. You're a marketing genius. So my experience is completely consistent with staff's view that if we were to require opt-in for community choice aggregation, we'd be killing this idea before we give it a fair chance to get started. So I am also in favor of this item, and I note that we've made it very easy for consumers to opt out. And as we've heard with Westchester, we're carefully monitoring all the complaints, and we won't hesitate to take action if there are any improper actions taking place.
Thank you. Commissioner Eckenpour?
I agree with Commissioner Sayre. We never want to be second to California, so we're going to get out there and do a lot more on this. But it is about community outreach, and I'm sure that knowing the organization in Westchester, they probably are reaching out to other communities throughout the state to show what this can do. And I think that as this moves along and the first report comes in after 13 months, that we will see huge movement on this. So I think, again, this is something that we've done that I think is good, and I think this decision is worth a positive vote today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman?
Thanks. So I have a couple of questions. The NFG raised the issue of going to the Attorney General and/or the Comptroller for a legal opinion. Could you explain that and why staff feels it's not appropriate for that?
Ted, do you want to?
Absolutely. So NFG suggests that the commission or staff request an opinion from the comptroller or the attorney general or both on several specific issues related to municipal authority and/or municipal responsibilities under certain state laws and constitutional provisions. The Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance, which has proposed a CCA and which works very closely with a number of municipalities already, filed some detailed comments regarding why they disagree with some of NFG's assertions that there may or is a problem. What the item discusses is that it's really not the Commission's role to rule on the proper interpretation of municipal law or constitutional requirements on municipalities, and it recognizes that municipalities have the ability and the expertise to do this themselves, to evaluate any legal questions or risks. And municipalities also are entitled to request opinions from the Attorney General and the Comptroller, so to the extent that they believe there are open questions there, they're able to do so. But it also recognizes that, as Mega demonstrates, municipalities have been engaging with this question and do believe that there aren't problems presented.
If I can, just because I think this was a matter too that we addressed in our original order too, which was the certification required of the municipality to make sure that they had the legal authority to proceed. And I think, if I recall, we had the same not the same discussion here, but it is it is not our role to tell a unit of government what their legal authority is. They need to make that determination, and then we expect them to represent to us that they have taken the right action.
So I generally agree in limited fashion, and I just really want to, because it's a nuanced position, and I really just want to make sure, because I am uncomfortable with leaving it that we are saying, there may be constitutional issues, which we do not believe, the majority does not believe, but, and leaving it to the municipality. And I just want to take a step back, because state agencies and other branches of government on state level do routinely ask for opinions from the Attorney General and or the Comptroller. And so my understanding is that, at least as to the Attorney General, that opinions are issued in response to requests by state agency officials and local government officials or attorneys. And the opinions kind of fall into two broad categories, formal and informal. And formal opinions are those that are issued to state departments and agencies or entities. And the informal ones are the ones that are for the local government at the request of the attorney for the local government. And I just wanted to sort of be careful that we are, making sure that if there are any broad constitutional issues that may arise or be, that we are helping to be consistent, and if necessary, ask the Attorney General and or the Comptroller for their guidance and seek, as is our is our right, a formal opinion on those issues, or look to whether or not municipalities need to be helped in their toolkit to ask for the proper formal or informal opinion. So part of our job is making sure that they have the right information, and the toolkit, which is put together by NYSERDA with others, including staff, that we make sure that we identify any of the low-hanging fruit, and this may fall within that. So I just wanted to take pause to address that specific issue, because otherwise it may come across that we're saying that's not our job and go to it, and I don't think that's what we intend at all. So I just wanted to clarify my concern on that issue.
Paul, do you? I think.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
if I could, as a former town attorney, I can tell you that a municipality only goes to the Attorney General for an informal opinion when they have absolutely no idea what to do with something. And an informal opinion of the Attorney General is not binding on anybody. Not on the town, not on the state, not on anybody else. It's just an informal opinion to try to help out. What the town really has to do is get an opinion of their town attorney as to what the municipality can do, and that's all that matters. It's not our role to decide what municipal law is or what constitutional law is. It's the town attorney's role. And so I think we should stay within those bounds.
Okay, and I appreciate...
the town officials are elected officials by their own community. They have plenty of responsibility for their own legal decisions, and it's really not our business to second-guess whatever they do.
I agree with you to the extent that it should be part of the community toolkit, which is important. I just wanted to flag, especially because this community choice aggregation program was set up without any legislative oversight, where others have, in other states, have been done through the legislative process. So there may be some concern, and to the extent that we are helping the municipalities have the toolkit that they need, it's important for us to make sure that we are looking at that issue and flagging it if appropriate and necessary. So
okay, but the towns are using their municipal home rule power and adopting local laws. And so they have a grant of authority under the municipal home rule law. As long as there's not an inconsistent state law, they can adopt a local law, giving themselves the powers that the legislature hasn't already enumerated for them. So again, the municipalities are aware of this. The municipal attorneys know how that whole system works because they use it all the time. And so I don't see any role for us in any of that.
Well, certainly, I would not feel comfortable opining on whether a municipal entity had the authority or did not have the authority to do what its town attorney presumably is allowing them to do. I do think that's not our role. Our role, and I think, should be focused on the implementation of the program to make sure our regulations and concerns around energy customers are protected. But saying that, I think the fact that we're requiring the certification was an intent to make sure that at least somebody looked at it to make sure that they had the exercise authority, which I presume nobody would sign a certification unless they've consulted with council, and local council has essentially told them that they're doing what they did. And I think that's the appropriate balance in terms of our job of making sure nobody is engaging in a program that is ultra vires relative to what they believe was within their authority. So
yes, again, I'm not looking to micromanage the municipalities. I was just looking to flag an issue that had been raised. We did have an informal opinion prior to the April order, and so to the extent that there may be other things, and as appropriate in the community toolkit, which is being worked on, we make sure that that issue doesn't get dropped if necessary to put it in. So thank you. The other issue I just really wanted to sort of focus on is, our community choice aggregation, and what I've been very consistent on is that I do believe that community choice aggregation, if done right, can be a really good thing. And for me, the focus has been on the pilot program. When we initially started, or when it was approved, which I dissented on at the April order, the pilot program for Sustainable Westchester was really just getting off the ground. And so we really didn't have data points, and we are looking to a June 2017 annual report, which will give us more information, including what the mix is and what's happened since then. So for me, it's very important that we look to making sure we are properly documenting and getting the data that we will need for a robust report, and then drill down on that to make changes or modifications as necessary. The concern I have is taking that pilot program that we've seen already has had some good information in terms of changes that may be necessary and improvements that may be able to be done, including letters to consumers and education and outreach, as well as including the need for municipalities to do more drill down on information. So for me, it's a concern that we start something statewide while we're still trying to work through a pilot program. I understand the balance, and I understand the need that others may be interested in partaking in it, but it does leave me concerned because we, are going full steam ahead with also still needing to get that data points from the pilot. And so, I do have some concern there. I will say, though, that there's also a need to make sure that whatever is done from an educational point of view, including at the municipal level and including looking at the toolkit, that it's really done in a unbiased way, really giving both the pros and the cons, even if, the messenger thinks that it's the best thing. I really do want to make sure that we carefully look and scrub any fact sheets or others that may be seeming to go more towards puffery versus making sure that they have the real concrete facts, and also to highlight some potential things to think of that may trip them up that they can then look to improve upon. We have seen some positive things, and some states have doing a great job, and some states within that state have some real winners, but there's also some that are not doing so well, and Illinois is one where we're seeing some conversation on the fact that some municipalities are going back to the utility because the initial successes are perceived as becoming failures. And so for me, it's also a matter of not just looking at the staff white paper that identified the 6 other states, I believe, but to continue to evaluate what we're learning. California has also had some positives and negatives. And so I want to be able to bring back that information in real time as we move forward, so that we are collaborating positively, so that they don't look back and say, well, we were using old data or not enough data to give us the information. I do have a question. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I do have a question on adding municipalities to programs. So maybe it's best if you explain that aspect of it, and then I ask if it hasn't been clarified, because we've talked, Ted, so I just want to make sure that we understand exactly what we're doing when we say we're adding municipalities, and they don't have to sort of come back to the commission. So if you could explain that.
Sure. I'm not sure that what I just wasn't quite sure of your question, but
Sure. So it's once a CCA program is running. So, for example, Westchester Power we call it one CCA program that has a number of municipalities in it within the county of Westchester. So, like Westchester Power, other CCA programs will likely include multiple municipalities, and some municipalities may want to join up after the initial program has actually started, or in between when the commission issues its order and when the program starts. So in either of those cases, the process would be the same as it's been in Westchester Power, which is that as long as the everything with the way it's done in that community is consistent with the initial implementation plan and with the commission's order approving that implementation plan, they are allowed to add additional municipalities by once those municipalities have passed a local law and conducted their required outreach, they can then notify the department and add that municipality, notify the department and the commission. If they were doing anything different, so for example, since we discussed the phased approach today, if all the municipalities that were approved so far were approved wholly and a new municipality wants to come in but through a phased approach, they then would have to come back to the commission because they were doing something different than what was in the initial implementation plan.
Okay, that I think is something that does, for me, raise a red flag, and that I just want to make sure that we are fully evaluating that as we go forward. I'm not saying it's not necessarily appropriate, especially if we're looking to lessen bureaucracy. My concern is that, in a sense, it is, sort of making it more difficult for a new Sustainable Westchester, somebody else who wants to come in, because once you are in and you've been approved, you can just say, well, you can skip sort of the commission process, and as long as you follow the other stuff, you can just get added to us, versus someone else who may be looking to be a new into the market.
I think,
so I just am trying to figure out what if we're looking at that aspect of it.
I think that's a good point. So maybe why don't we take that back and think about that, because I think what you're saying is it could compromise the competitive aspects. Is if someone says, well, we'll just add you to an existing program, and then someone else would have to start off with a new implementation, and so there might maybe there's some further clarification, but
and I'm not saying that it couldn't work. I just want to make sure that we're flagging that issue.
If I just absolutely, that's something that we'll take back and make sure that we're not causing anything like that. I think one other thing I just mentioned is we would expect the initial implementation plan to identify a geographic area, and if they were going to go outside that area, that's another thing that would trigger new commission consideration. So for Westchester Power, we wouldn't expect them to start adding people at municipalities in Orange County without coming back to the commission.
So these would be communities that were previously identified as potential communities who may not have signed up yet. All right, good point, but let's talk about it because we don't want gaming going on either, and we've run into these issues in other contexts. So,
okay, I appreciate that, and looking at that goes to, and I won't continue to belabor comments that I made at the April order, as well as not at the February 2015. Because I was excused from the session that day, but in the initial opening of it. So I would refer people back to those transcripts for some of my continuing concerns as we move forward, and really more towards the focus of making sure that we incorporate any potential concerns into our ongoing statewide effort in refining the program as we go forward. With that, I do have a question, because as I look to both the Sustainable Westchester case and then the community choice generic proceeding, it does seem like there are a number of issues that have been raised, one being focused on data security agreements and data transfer fees, as well as some implementation issues and concerns. And those aren't addressed in this order nor the April order. So what is sort of the game plan for addressing those, and how does it mirror up with the Sustainable Westchester program, which also has open filings on that?
go ahead, Tim.
So there are several kind of open parts of the community choice aggregation proceeding. Two, as you identified, are that in the April order, the utilities were required to file both proposed data security agreements and proposed data access fees for commission review, consideration, and eventually approval or modification. So those are the comment period on the data security fees, I believe, just ended. And staff is currently engaged in some review and also engaging with the utilities to make sure we fully understand how they were calculated. So that's still pending for commission review and approval. Those wouldn't apply to Sustainable Westchester because they individually negotiated fees as was permitted for their pilot, and individually worked out a data security agreement, again, as was permitted for their pilot. In addition, the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance has filed their implementation plan, but they still need to file several more documents, as they know, before the commission can consider that implementation plan. So that's also pending commission consideration, but we'll wait until they've filed those documents. And certainly in reviewing that implementation plan, we'll be taking a look at all the comments that we have related to what's gone right and wrong in Sustainable Westchester and other aspects of the generic proceeding.
Okay, thank you. I really have nothing further. I do obviously have some concerns with the ongoing pilot program where we're still waiting for information, and then having done the statewide program. I do understand the good intent behind that, but to the extent that there are a lot of things that we need to look at and some unintended consequences, both positive and negative. Because I dissented on the original order, I'm going to abstain from voting here on this while my concerns still are there. However, I do embrace working through these in a robust way, and focusing on the work work ahead, especially as it comes to working with the relevant entities, not only at the state level with NYSERDA, but with the municipalities in making sure they have the information, as well as the potential costs outside of the actual community choice program as it relates to the customers and the fees there. So thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Okay. I'm going to then move for a vote on item 202, which is in connection with the petitions related to the April 2016 Community Choice Aggregation Order. All those in favor of the recommendations on the request for rehearing, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And I'm abstaining.
3 in favor and 1 abstention. The motion carries and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to move on to the consent agenda. Do any of the commissioners wish to abstain or recuse from voting on any of the items in the consent agenda? No. Okay. Any comments on the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, then all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being no opposition, the recommendations are adopted. So, before we close today, two items actually. So, one is, there's a since we're sort of in the high holiday seasons, but they just ended. There's a Yiddish term of kvelling, which is the opportunity to brag about, and mostly it's about your children. And we're sort of family here, and we like to brag about our children, but I just, before we do move on, I want to note that we have a bragging right in that our own Christine Dickinson, who works with Mike Corso's son, is the first boy who's going to be on CoverGirl, first male. So we're very, very proud for Christine, and we're very, very proud for James Charles. So thank you, and we'll convey that to Christine. The only thing I did mention to her is that since her son is now world-renowned for his capability of doing makeup, we really think he should show up on Thursdays once a month, and we'll all look a lot better. So, but I don't know if he'll come. I think he's too big for us now. The other item, though, is much more somber. As many of you know, Raj Adapalli has sadly, and to kind of demoralized us, announced that he will be retiring, a well-deserved retirement, but certainly something that we're all very sad about. And I have a resolution for Raj that all the commissioners have signed, and talks about his fantastic service. I won't read the entire, but I think I would note that Raj has been with us since 1985. He was first appointed as a temporary budget assistant, staffing the 9 Mile 2 prudency investigation. It's amazing how this plant has sort of followed you through your career, Raj. And has served in the department in a variety of roles, including program research specialist, principal policy and compliance analyst, and chief of consumer policy and compliance. Raj is also, not only has he been a great service to the state, he's really been a great service to the world. He's worked extensively with NARUC in helping other countries who've looked at New York's leadership in regulation and understanding how it works, and he's earned the respect and deep appreciation of many, many other regulatory agencies across the world because of the assistance that he's provided. I think that all of us in the department, but certainly all of us, I think, in the state in this area, understand the depth of knowledge that Raj brings, but also the depth of wisdom and kindness that he brings, because I don't think there's many people who can say, no, you can't do that in as nice a way as Raj Adapalli, and you walk away feeling good about yourself, even though he just told you your idea was about the stupidest idea he ever heard. So, but more importantly, he's guided us, he's guided the commissioners, he's guided many staff. I talk a lot to staff about this issue about, how do you develop your career, and I think you take a look at what Raj has done, the risks he's taken, his willingness to do different things, his willingness to learn. Certainly someone I would always say that he's certainly a student of the world, and we know he's a man of many talents. We've seen him sing. We've seen him dance. He tells great jokes, even though most people don't recognize that. And he's always ready for a smile and extremely patient. So I can't tell you how much we're going to miss him. The other thing that I sort of thought about in thinking about Raj's departure, and we started to put together a list. I mean, if you think about this, right? Who do you think about on a one-name basis? Where's my list? There's Michelangelo, there's Plato, there's Aristotle, there's Madonna, there's Sting, there's Westinghouse, there's Edison, there's Tesla, and there's Raj. So with that, I know others want to make comments, but I do want to note one thing, and as I asked what's a good quote that I think that we could describe Raj, and I think this is a great one from Swami, and Greg, help me pronounce this.
Vivekananda.
Is that right? So, okay, close enough. The great secret of true success, of true happiness, is this: the man or woman who asks for no return, the perfectly unselfish person, is the most successful. And I would think that from any measure we would agree, Raj, that you are exceedingly successful. So we're going to miss you a lot. And before we say anything more and before I start crying, I'll let Patty pick up.
Raj, it's been really a pleasure and an honor to work with someone of your abilities. You really exemplify a true professional in every sense of the word. And when people think you work for the state, many people don't realize that we are so fortunate to have such professionals work with us. And I've always admired your ability, because you are a very technical person, to make those of us who are not technical people understand truly what is involved in a particular matter. And I think one of the things I will miss about you is the calmness that you bring to a very heated type of matter that we may address. And I think your calming influence has been of great help to the rest of us. And as the chair had said, you are known internationally, and I had the pleasure to go on a trip through Nairuk to Croatia, where your expertise was invaluable to them. But I have to tell everyone in the audience, if you don't know Raj well, Raj has a sweet tooth. And he's the only person I know that went on a trip and says, well, I have to pick something up for the kids. And what did he come back with? Candy. I said, I know we have a dental plan, but I don't think it's that good. And I guess my candy dish in New York will kind of stay full, except, I don't know, maybe some other people will pick up the slack.
There's me.
You and somebody else over there. So I always tell everybody, collect a lot of checks and good health. But in this instance where I mentioned about candy, I wish that your life be like a box of candy, sweet and full of good surprises. So we wish you Godspeed in all that you do, and thank you for your service to the people of the state of New York.
Mr. Sir?
Since you're sitting right in front of me, Raj, I'll address my comments directly to you. Raj, you're one of the most intelligent people I know. both in terms of innate smarts and the incredible breadth and depth of the subject matter knowledge that you have of the huge area that's under your jurisdiction. Like Commissioner Akampora, I'm going to particularly miss your ability to take extraordinarily complicated issues, situations, market mechanisms, all the things that go into REV, and explain them in terms that anybody can understand. If you ever go into the field of education, you'll be a great teacher. But you are also a terrific leader. You know how to develop your people, you know how to mentor them, and you also have the humility to step out of the limelight and let them shine when they can shine. So if you ever go into industry, you'll be a great leader. Raj, I'll miss you.
So, as some people know, I butcher names and have a hard time pronouncing things. And I really am kind of annoyed that it took me really just about a week ago to finally pronounce your name right and you're leaving. For me, I really have a memory of your focusing and when I would say, can you give that to me in a non-technical way? And you would explain it, and I'd say, okay, now can you go further and explain it in even a more non-technical way? And your ability to continue to make sure that I fully understood something, and where you would drill down where necessary and answer all of the questions that I would throw at you, and help to make it a seamless process, and one that I would come away from feeling that I got all of the information and then some, and understanding, whatever the situation was. One of the memories I have on a personal level is seeing you almost routinely coming home late. We live near each other, and always knowing that you were working hard, way past the working hour, and always having a smile. A few times maybe you wanted to hit me, but and just the ability that I felt like you were giving it 120% professionally, and despite the long hours, you continued to smile and produce. My kids also have a memory of you, which we've discussed. It was a really, really hot summer day up in the 90s, and you were jogging somewhat slowly in a light gray jogging suit. And all of a sudden my youngest said, "Oh my God, do you see that man?" And you were out there, very, very hot. It was apparent. And I said, "Oh my God, I know that man. He works with me." And my son said, "What are you doing to him?" And I still remember, that image of, you, because it really showed true character to me. I mean, most people would not be out there at that time. And you were sort of like, bring it on. And it was very eye-opening for me. To sort of see just the dedication you have in everything that you do, and the ability to continue to work through things no matter how hard, and to sort of push yourself to all the limits, and really still taking time to bring along others, and I beeped and you smiled, and we continued on. I try to find an appropriate retirement comment, and really what comes to mind for me is for Ralph Waldo Emerson, which says, what lies behind us and what lies before us, or small matters compared to what lies within us. And I think that's really appropriate because you do have a lot of goodness in you, and we will be missing you greatly. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and speaking of excelling, in addition to being the great intellect and the great leader and a great colleague and a great friend, Raj is also a great husband and father. And also, I know there will be many things, good things coming his way in his last chapter, including a daughter who's getting married. So we wish you all the best, and we're going to miss you a lot. And I know I say that not only just for the people in this agencies, but the entire industry that you've served, as well as the people of New York. So thank you.
Just a couple of comments.
Yes.
Thank you all for your kind words. It's been a great privilege working here for the last 31 years. It's been a great honor. It's been a great pleasure, and it's been a great learning experience. Thanks to all you commissioners for your great support, and especially Chair Zibelman and past Chair Akampora for giving me additional responsibilities and placing confidence in me. And thanks to the institution, the Public Service Commission, for adopting me pretty much. And thanks to all my colleagues, those who are here and those who have retired, who have helped me learn and grow in this 31 years of journey. I'm going to greatly miss it, but thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right. Before we all lose it, Commissioner Burgess, is there any, or Commissioner Secretary Burgess, are there any other, I'll get this one right eventually. I still have some more in my term to serve. Is there anything further in front of us today?
There's nothing further before you today. The next commission meeting is November 17th.
Great. Thank you all.